And now let me introduce Bobby. Bobby is an Arizona-based sculptor, skilled in a variety of materials with a wealth of experience producing artworks for private and public spaces. His industrious work ethic and urban design sense enable him to create distinctive works of art that foster new and dynamic relationships between community, site, history, and the natural environment. Blurring the lines between fine art, public sculpture, and collaborative practices, his work engages diverse audiences, humanizes public spaces, and often encourages participation with larger than life-size artwork. From Virginia, Bobby earned his BFA at the New York School of Ceramics at Alfred University in New York and his MFA in sculpture from Arizona State University. He recently completed 2 municipal infrastructure projects, one with us, which she's going to talk about today, and a second one with Valley Metro. I believe that one's in Tempe on the streetcar line, right? It is integral to Bobby's practice that his work connects residents to one another and their community in new ways, creating new and lasting experiences, which he's going to talk about today. So that's a little bio on Bobby, and I want to share a really cool video that's a fun summary of the project. And let me get that going. I want to optimize for motion and video. Sharing this screen. Can you see the blank screen, Bobby? We get a thumbs up. Okay. Hopefully we will have sound here.
My name is Bobby Zokaites. I specialize in large-scale sculpture. I believe that art can be part of the built environment. This is a project we recently finished, a time machine called Tinaja. The actual build took 2.5 years worth of designing, about 8 months to go from pea gravel to what you see here. Tinaja in the Sonoran Desert references surface water. So as you walk through the site, you actually get the history of the last 100 years in the Phoenix Valley. It was amazing to have the teamwork of the city.
Bobby Zokaites was the artist selected for this project because of the demonstrated quality in his past work.
Originally, this was a well site that we had from the 1950s that the department used up until the 1980s. We came together with the arts and culture, as long as with the community, to try to come up with a project and turn this into what we have today.
This lot was empty, but also it was like a dumping of trash. This was an amazing idea because now we see a beautiful garden and can walk and take pictures. This is day and night, and I'm really grateful for this.
We were able to incorporate some ideas from Trevor G. Brown High School.
The students had the opportunity to be involved with this project through meeting with the artists and the landscape architects. They were able to provide suggestions about what they would like to see in this spot, and the artists and architects took it back and designed this beautiful land.
Our site was really a blank slate. What we had to kind of rely on was the history of the area being Maryvale, one of the first master plan communities in the valley. Prior to that, it was agricultural land. And then after that, it was really kind of working with Bobby on how we could cite his art, but number two, kind of tell a story with its placement. The hardscape and the paths that we laid out were very much in line with some of the historic development. We overlaid that with a very structured planning, very much like an agricultural row planting. You know, would not be a static moment in time, but would change.
The fact that we're able to do projects like this one, where we can start beautifying the district and we can get people to come and enjoy it and being a part of it, that's what creates community.
Okay, that was an introduction to the project, and then I'm going to just let Bobby take it away from here.
Thanks, Katie. That was a good introduction. I'm going to share this one. So, a cool thing about working with so many people is they do a lot of work. And so these first few images were put together by DIG, the Landscape Architecture Studio. and are about what the site was when we started. And so here we have an aerial of sort of this block that the site is on. The site is this little pea gravel thing, and then this is Estrella Middle School and Trevor G. Brown High School, and then this is Oso Park. And so what we did when we started, well, first I'll say I made a mistake and drew a really fun thing that would have been fun to make but wasn't right for the site. And so we decided to workshop it. And we actually went into the high school here, into their art classes, and brainstormed with the students there. And a big thing that they kept talking about is they would walk along this road to pick up their siblings at the middle school. And there are lots of things about it that, one, this street doesn't have any street lamps on it, so it's very dark. Two, this being the only spot that doesn't have grass on it, it's what we call here in Phoenix a urban heat island effect, and so it was very hot. And so those were sort of the two pragmatic things we were trying to solve. And then also just we came up with the time machine because of that nostalgic feeling that the high schoolers had walking back into their middle school. So this is another aerial. There's a few other problems or issues with the site. One is this is a maintenance yard for the park that's right here. And so we needed to try to block that. And then also this is a, what do you call that? An archery range. And so that's what this little red line is that's the right of way for the arrows. And then here are sort of the existing, what the site was when we started. And so you can see crushed granite gravel. We have this communication tower here that was used by the Phoenix Fire Department, which is good because that actually supplies power for the site. And then these photos are of the ball fields that are next door for the middle school. And so the rest of this is kind of about the process. So I was able to make this sketch in my studio for the preliminary designs. And then the engineer, I gave that virtual model to the engineer and he was able to produce these drawings. There is a fence that I designed on the site, which is sort of this Art Deco inspired fence. It's got a luminary on it. And then Dig Studio put together these drawings at that same point. So this is the proposal. And so you can see here that the fence has this mustache curve, which comes from the street design. We also have different plantings. So we chose to represent the time machine aspect as far as this area here representing a contemporary park, and then these decorative cactus rows. Phoenix is Phoenix because of agriculture, and so this represents the early development of the valley here, which is about the same time that Art Deco was a thing. So the fence, and then we go into natural desert planting. And so as you walk this way through the site, you get the history of the last 100 years in the Phoenix Valley. And this, I like this rendering a lot. This is after the trees grow up, and they've been growing actually substantially this last year, but the idea is that you'll get this, the actual time machine sculpture thing in more of an intimate setting after the trees grow up. And so then the rest of this presentation is kind of about the build and go back and forth between how many people helped and the suppliers and stuff. And so this is actually the yard of Chakar PTS. They're one of the few people in the valley that can bend heavy steel like this. And this is me picking up the steel on my trailer. And then the layout, I had to build these sawhorses to be able to hold the layout, and you can see I'm setting up to cut and weld on the brackets here. This is a fun photo. There's a lot of going on. For the project, I had to build this gantry crane, which was super fun. And then to weld on the brackets, I got to hold the pipes in weird ways. And then this is the making of the lamps. And so you can see these posts right now. It kind of really looks like a cactus, which is kind of where we drew inspiration for the pattern on it. But for the project, we actually had to produce around 700 of these stanchions that then receive a Lumicore panel on top of it, and the lighting sits behind. This is, you can see I've got jig work here just to get the spacing right. And this process to get all of these little tabs on these two sections took about 3 weeks. And then this is the pack job to take it to the powder coater. That's my studio mate, Zach. This is after powder coating. We made these wooden yokes to make the handling a little bit better so nobody would bend these stanchions. And then this is install day. And so the fence was made by Magnum Fabrication. They were on site already putting up the stanchions for the fence line you see in the background here. And so we showed up at the same time and got to use their petty boom to help install. It's always a fun day when you get to play with cranes. This is back at the studio. You can see I've got the light fixtures mounted on the back, and I'm starting to assemble the Lumicore panels here. In order to do this, we had to put the Lumicore and the lights on the site, which was fun. We rented this giant man lift to do it. It was pretty tight in this negative space here. And here it is totally assembled. A really cool effect that was a happy accident, actually, is my favorite part. In the early morning, you get this line of panels being highlighted. And you can see here the entire time that we were on site building, putting together the arches, Felix Construction and their landscaping crews were on site putting in all of the plants. We don't have the fence in yet at this photograph. And we've set it up kind of so we don't disturb the neighbors because it's pretty bright. We added these municipal like prefab light fixtures so that after 10 o'clock at night we can still have the sidewalk lit, but we don't disturb the neighbors with the light from the project. This photograph is from the night that we met to make those decisions. And so this is the lights at full power, which is pretty cool. And this is sort of the hero shot at the end. Let's see. That is how they were made and put together. I guess
Bobby, could you pull your presentation back up and talk more about that collaboration with Magnum? How did that come to be? What was it like working with them? How did you feel like they worked with you as a steel fabricator working with an artist? Can you talk more about that interaction with Magnum?
Yeah. So I got my early training as a large scale sculptor at Franconia Sculpture Park in Minnesota. And I get a lot of satisfaction from actually making the work. But in this case, the fence line is 450 feet long and required a line every 4 inches. And so we decided to sub that out. And Magnum was the perfect shop to use. They actually started out as a fence manufacturer here in Phoenix about 3 generations ago. And because of that, they have a whole lot of design solutions that I don't have access to. And so they were able to figure out like the joint between the panels and the stanchions. And they were able to figure out there's a lot of, let me see if I can zoom. I don't actually have a photo of the fence. In these triangular sections here, there is material overlap that would have allowed for corrosion even with the powder coating. And so they saw that as a concern, and they actually troubleshot it. And so it's a much better product. And I had a blast working with them because I was able to go sit in with their designers and actually make a lot of those decisions or advise on those decisions. So yeah, it was actually a pretty fun project, part of the project, and I didn't have to have the responsibility of making it, which was a lot less stress.
And they also did the powder coating of the arches, correct? I think.
Yeah. So what we did was because it was the first time that I was fabbing a component and they were fabbing a component, we actually re-met our manufacturing streams at the point of powder coating, just to make sure the color was consistent across all the metalwork.
So would you recommend them to any other artists to work with?
I
I
totally
certainly
would.
think they're fantastic.
They are absolutely fantastic. I would say they're the best in the Valley for this stuff, for sure.
Yeah, they're really wonderful to work with, and they like working with artists. They like working on artist projects. Are there any questions from the floor? You guys should be able to unmute yourself. I don't have any questions in the chat box. And if we don't have any questions from the floor, I have a couple other questions for you, Bobby, about the process and your presentation. But I'm going to leave it open for any of our participants. You're welcome to turn your cameras on or unmute yourself. If you can't unmute yourself, send me a message in the chat box. Let me figure out what's going on. But I have the settings set, so you should be able to unmute yourself. Question coming from David: how does this relate to other work that you've done?
Thank you for your question, David. It relates in several ways. One, the patterning. I do a lot of weaving, and so that work cannot exist outside. And so the Lumicore and the aesthetic of building this fractal pattern definitely relates aesthetically. Conceptually, it is a space that people get to come and interact with, and so I think it matches my larger scale work pretty well in that sense. And Kelly asked how I was working with Lumicore. Working with Lumicore is amazing, and I generally talk about my collaboration with Lumicore and the digital processes, because I can be here in Arizona and design all of the work, and then send a cut path up to Washington State, where they're based, and I definitely get it's a good, like, the pipeline is such that like I get the exact part that I asked for, and so it's a pretty good streamlined process. Katie's showing everybody my website.
Yeah, I'm showing the website because I want you to look at the patterns that you see that Bobby's created here in the Tinaja project. It really does reference the pattern of the squares from his weaving projects. So it's cool for us to see this progression of work from yeah, this was the first weaving project, right? Tom Sawyer, where you were at
Yeah,
ASU?
that was my thesis project. I did that in 2014.
And to
Which,
see it continue to grow, and then it is, your style is continually growing and reflected even as you're progressing into larger and larger works, which is neat.
for sure. And I also like the proportion of color in it. I think is also pretty good, even though it is monochromatic. But all of the different facets allow for that sort of subtle change in that patterning, which I think is a new thing in that work, which I'm really happy with.
You mentioned the happy accident of seeing the some of the panels reflected. Were there any sort of other happy accidents that came along with the process of working with maybe the landscape architect or the students?
I mean, Katie, you know, the whole thing. Like, it's interesting to come as an artist. You kind of have to sidestep a little bit. You have to give the community their voice. And so I remember when we came up with the concept of the time machine, I actually went around to a whole bunch of my friends who like reading science fiction and said, I get to build a time machine. Which was really cool. And I definitely couldn't have done the plantings without Dig, or any of that. And so, yeah, I mean, the collaborative aspect, I wouldn't say they were accidents, but it definitely made the project a whole lot more than I could have done myself.
So for those who may not have seen or heard explained the progression of the different types of landscaping, how did that come about? I know we started the project. I was kind of just pulling anything about the site that I could and giving it to you guys. And there was some historic aerial photos. And is that kind of where we started looking at the different patterns for the landscaping, and then it combined with the idea of the time machine that came from some students? What was that like, taking the ideas from the students and then the inspiration from photos and working with Dig? How did that, like, where was there a point where it just like clicked and you were like, yeah, this is it?
I wish I could say that's how inspiration worked. No, so a cool thing about being in Phoenix, actually, for the last 20 years, Phoenix does an aerial mapping. They fly a plane overhead and take photographs of the city, and that actually goes back as far as aerial photographs are available. And so, being
I
a
think there
history
are some
buff,
going back to the 1940s in that
yeah,
archive.
yeah, I think there's some going back to the 1940s. There's definitely they tried to get them before that, but a little harder to do. And so that's really cool. Especially like I'm a history buff, and there's like some interesting things. Like Jackson Pollock actually spent 3 years of his life here on a farm. You can see that eucalyptus tree in the back of this photograph you have. That's actually left over from an irrigation ditch. And that's about 85 feet tall, and about 100 years old. And then a cool thing that happened actually right after right before we went into the high school, I like to go hiking, and I went out to some petroglyphs. And a thing that the students did, they actually brought up the idea of a maze a lot, and I had just seen this crazy petroglyph maze on a wall that was there for 4,000 or 5,000 years. And sort of all of that came together, and we realized that we could make it specifically about the growth of the valley, and we could embed this nostalgic idea by referencing the photographs. And I'd say figuring that part out took 2 or 3 months of sort of nailing these different ideas together, and having this gateway arch thing came about at that point. At the same time, the guys at Dig were sort of figuring out how to do the planting, and sort of the idea. You notice that the sculpture is not on concrete; it's on compressed earth, which is going to keep that area of the site a little bit cooler, but also like I like that natural connection with the built environment in a physical way.
We have another question from the chat box, which is a really good one. When you come up with ideas for projects, how do you decide how much you need to do and how much the fabricators need to do, and where do you find the fabricators?
So that's interesting. Finding the fabricators is kind of hard. I actually found a couple of fabricators, and wanted to go with a smaller shop, but they didn't have the infrastructure to do this. And that's definitely a thing that helps decide if I need to hire extra fabricators. Just the sheer scale of the fences, each one of those panels is 6 feet tall and 10 feet long. And if there's 47 panels, so they're 2 inches deep. So if you stacked them on a trailer to say drive across town to take them to a powder coater's, right? They're going to be 4 or 5 feet tall on a trailer, and way more than the trailer that I have can actually pull. And so there's a lot of like physical constraints like that that affect that decision. A big thing, like I don't like doing concrete work, and there's definitely been projects in the past where I've like laid my own foundations and stuff. But that's certainly the first thing that I take off my plate when somebody says, "Oh, we can get somebody else to do that." Like, for sure. And so I think the big thing with this project for me, it's probably the smallest amount of work on a site that I've ever done. I mean, it's also the first project that I've been able to have a hand in designing this amount of space. And so for me, very much like keeping the arches in-house allowed me to have the satisfaction of making it. But by subbing out to Magnum, I definitely didn't have the stress of having to do everything. And so I feel like that's one of those things about running your own business is you're constantly having this introspective ideas on what you can and cannot do, or should and should not do.
Did you find that it was harder or easier to make those decisions in a project like this? Like, were you able to come to the city and say, I want to build this, but I don't have the equipment and the space to do it. So can you support me in purchasing something? How do you make when you get down to that decision? Because you built the gantry crane, you did tons of the welding yourself. So you did do a lot of heavy lifting in your studio, more than I would say as a project manager I typically expect of a public artist. Because you had some of that, you had it in your studio, you had the capability and the time to do it. So how do you say, okay, well, I have the time to do this, I have the time to build a gantry crane, but I don't have time to find enough space for 47 6x10 fencing panels?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a hard one, because I mean, with arts and coming up, and like all of the work before this, right? You're constantly trying to figure out how to push budgets, right? Sort of the opportunities for less experienced artists are, $5,000 or $10,000, and so you want to push it, right? So you have ideas about recycled materials and doing all of the work yourself, to try to save enough money to be able to pull off an amazing project at that price point. And I think with this project, and it was the first time I've ever experienced the fact that we got to set the budget, we got to propose the idea, and part of that was setting the budget. And so there was a lot more to be able to go to a fabricator and say, hey, will you make this, and how much will it cost? So like the city was very helpful in that manner. And yeah, and I'd say that was a big point of reducing the stress on it. But yeah, I'd say doing a lot of those earlier projects are why I got the skill, why I have the skills to be able to build the gantry cranes and that sort of stuff. And actually, the project I did for Valley Metro, they had me go get a welding certification, just to make sure that my welds would meet their quality, being next to a train, which I think helped convince Katie to allow me to do some of these projects, because it has to be able to go outside. It has to be able to go outside. This neighborhood is what, 250,000 people living in it. And so, I mean, I was out there last week about 3:00 when the students got out of school, and there's 1,000 middle school students that get out at 2:30, 3:00, and walk down this road. And so you have, everything's got to be durable. Everything's got to be built well. And we expect this to last 100 years. And so that very much changes how you have to make those decisions, for sure.
So if it's going to last 100 years, we have a question here that says, are the lights solar powered? You want to answer that one?
The lights are not solar powered. However, they are LEDs, which do not draw much power.
Do we put them on a sensor? Are they on a photocell?
They are on a photocell, which controls the on and off.
So I
think it's a sensor, a timer, and a dimmer.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on in those lights.
Yeah, and so where this photograph was taken is from the area of that communication pole.
Let's see if I can find the pole. There's the picture.
It's
back here in the back corner.
And so all the power comes from that. And so there's different driver boxes in the ground that go to the different lights. And so a driver converts the AC power, the alternating current, to the direct current that the LEDs require, and then it's a very low amperage. It is, I think, less than a half an amp per foot. And so the arches actually require more power than the luminaries. And the fact that there's 5 lines going across. So I think there's 60 feet of light on both arches. So we're not getting up to what a light bulb costs, like a traditional light bulb costs to run, I guess.
So how long do you think that each of these fixtures are going to last? When do I need to send somebody out to buy a new fixture and replace it?
I think they're guaranteed by the lighting company for 5 years, but we're only turning them on for, I guess, between 6 hours and 3 hours, depending on the summer or the winter. So
yeah, because they're only on from like sunset until 9 or 10 p.m.
Yeah.
Because as it gets really dark here in this area, they become really bright, and we have neighbors right across the street. So we had to go out at night and like make some decisions about what time should this turn off. So like when people are going to bed, they don't have bright lights shining. We also don't want people coming into this site after dark as well. So there is some signage there, and that says you cannot be in the site after dark. So like between sunset and 10 p.m. is that's prime time.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions from the chat box? If not, I can keep going. I got lots more questions. I'm not seeing any at the moment, but Bobby, is there one thing you wish you could have done different? You have a completely successful project here, but if there was one thing you could have done different in the project, do you have something?
That's a tough one. Because I mean, from an artist perspective, you see all the mistakes, and you always see all of the mistakes, but you're not supposed to point them out. I definitely want to do more of this with actually maybe more subtle color change. I think the blue was perfect for the reference to the water. I don't think we've said this yet, but this is a water well site. And so the city owns it because there's a well, and in the 80s there was a giant water tank that sat on top of it. And so that's where the blue and the nice flow of the arches comes from in the name. And so in future projects that maybe don't relate to water as much, I definitely want to amp up that the patterning and use different colors in the Lumicore.
Cool. Take it to the next level, next project.
Yeah.
There's a question about the plants. Are the plants watered? Yes, the plants are watered with irrigation. They're also maintained. Like Bobby mentioned, this is a water services department owned piece of land. To explain a little bit more about this, Bobby's is the third in a series of projects. I think ultimately we will have one in every single council district. So eventually we're going to build 8 of these throughout the city. The city has these large empty lots of land that used to be water wells that provided water to either farmland or neighborhoods, but currently the water in these sites, in these wells, is not accessible due to contaminants in the water or whatever. 50 to 100 years from now, we may be able to utilize this for a water well again. So the water department is not selling off any of these properties, but they've just been these empty plots of land throughout the city of Phoenix. So they've partnered with us to start transforming them in these really incredible ways. So they own the property, and they actually are in agreement with us to maintain and take care of it. So they have a landscape maintenance team that comes out and I think trims things up on a regular basis and make sure that if there's a dead plant, they take it out and replace it with a new one, things like that. So there is ongoing maintenance for these sites, which is really cool. If there's ever any damage to the art pieces, the fence or the sculptures, then we would come back to Bobby and say, okay, this is what's happened. How can we replace it or take care of it or repair it? And we work with the water department to make sure we're doing it and maintaining the site as it was originally planned. Another question, how long did the sculpture time machine take to create? That's a question with layers.
So many layers. We actively were working on the design for about 2 years. And then the build took about 8 months to do everything. And that 8 months there was the contractor working on the site, there was Magnum working on the fence, and then I was also working on the arches and the luminaries. And so it's kind of hard to calculate how many man hours it took for sure, but about 8 months, I would say, to build the thing.
Oh, I'm muted, sorry. One thing that I think is cool about this project as well is that most of the, Bobby is local to Arizona. The contractor who built the hardscape and the landscape is local. The landscape architects are local. Magnum is local. So we're able to invest city dollars back into jobs here in the city of Phoenix, which is a really cool story to tell. And yeah, we love being able to work on projects with these local fabricators and create jobs. And we built this last summer in 2020 when lots of people were losing jobs and there wasn't money available. And so we were able to keep people working and keep people in business during a time when things were really uncertain. So that makes me feel good about my job.
I do remember Katie actually having conversations about the plague ships off the coast before we knew what was coming, And that's
Yeah.
about the time that we started the build.
Yeah.
And so the build went straight through all that early COVID craziness, for sure.
All right. Are there any other questions? If you're a participant, you are welcome to unmute yourself. If not, we might be able to end a little bit early.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Bobby, thank you so much for talking about your work and joining us with that here today. And if you guys are interested in learning more, check out Bobby's website. You can also visit the Office of Arts and Culture's website. That's phoenix.gov/arts. I can show you where that is. And we've got information about Bobby's Artist Talk. And there's a whole website about the project as well, the project page. If you click on that link there, you should be able to find it. That video we showed earlier is there, some pictures and more information about the process and the name of the project. So there's a question about the recording. It is being recorded. We will be posting it on YouTube. This is our YouTube channel. I'm going to pop that link into the chat box. If you save that, you'll be able to see all of the artist talks that we are doing in April. I'm going to post this one and the one from Jody Pinto that we did 2 weeks ago. I'm going to post those on our YouTube page today. It might take me a couple hours to get them uploaded because they're pretty large files, but yes, definitely will be recorded and you can have a copy by finding it on YouTube. Awesome. All right. Thank you, everybody. We will be back with another one of these artist talks next week. So check out our website and you can find more information about how to register there. We're going to be talking with Dan Mayer. He just finished a bridge here in Phoenix that is across the 17. Thank you so much.